It's been a while since I made one of these videos. Last year I made a video like this. I was talking about the land conference that happened here in Namibia and what the outcome might be. Well, I did mention, I gave almost, let me say, I foretold what the outcome would be. Of course, the biggest outcome that came out of it was things such as people claiming ancestral land, of course, which is the biggest thing. They're still having their talks right now in Namibia. We've drawn up an ancestral land commission that will sit down and look at it. But what has happened since we had that land conference last year in October? We're in July now, actually leading to the end of July. We are hit currently, as the rest of the world might know, might not know, we're hit with one of the worst droughts we've experienced here in Namibia. I think the last time we experienced something this bad was in the 80th, not, I think it was 1980, somewhere there back then, if my history is not failing me, where we received below average rainfall. Some parts there was no rainfall at all. We had light rain drizzles. You know, it has prompted a couple of companies which are into turning bush into which are into turning things such as the bush encroachment that's heavily here in Namibia into bush feeds. A lot of farmers have jumped onto them on that band and have started producing their own feeds. But of course, you need the machine, and the machine costs money. So now you have a situation whereby you can produce your own feeds, but you need the miller, you need the milling machine to chip and whatnot. Of course, as I said, there are now other alternative ways to feed. I've read a couple of articles of some farmers taking the maize stalks and of course milling them and turning them into feed for the animals to keep them alive. But what I want to point out here is three things: the slow movement by, of course, our government, and by also the farmers unions, and also by the farmers. The first one why I say the government is our government. Okay, our weather watching departments, agencies that watch the weather and the rainfall did warn beginning of the year that the rain patterns might not improve because there was the cyclone in Madagascar and not in Madagascar but in Mozambique. So what that did, it affects the rain patterns this side. They did warn about it, which I believe that when that warning, when that bell was rung, the farmers themselves, commercial and communal farmers, should have taken a heed to the call and said, look, let's sell off some of our animals, or yeah, let's sell off some of our animals and stay with a small number and see how things go. But it didn't happen. We still have a situation whereby in these drought times, you have guys who are still running very large herds of cattle who are losing cattle to the drought and don't have any other alternative places to feed their cattle. Last week we had people illegally invade the military base to graze their cattle, which I understand where the pain comes from. And they were asked to they were asked to leave the land. And what happened was, there was a standoff between themselves and the military. And you had one of our opposition leaders, Honorable McHenry Venani, who came to come intervene. And eventually, after he left, the farmers were kicked off the area, were kicked off the farm. The president has now asked for a proper investigation done to it to see what the events that happened there, a proper investigation into the events that happened there. I believe what should have been done is the military should have shown some, it should have shown some humanity to say, look, we can allow you guys to keep your animals, drink and graze them here for a while, but maybe up till next year or end of this year, if the weather patterns improve, you guys remove your cattle. They could have come up with a certain type of an agreement between the two, but it wasn't met in such a way. The guys were forced to vacate and they left. So the farmers that are really being hammered here by this drought are the guys. It's every farmer who's experiencing this drought, but it's mostly the guys who you say survive wholeheartedly on farming. The weekend farmers are busy. Are busy navigating this drought a bit better because the farming is not his biggest enterprise. He has a job, maybe a position in government or somewhere, and he's getting paid from that, or some private company, and he's being paid for that. So he can every month, every end of the month, take part of his salary, go to Agra and buy Lucerne bales, which have now become, how much one Lucerne bale costs, like $155. The prices of that increases with the increase of fuel. I heard fuel will be increasing soon, or it has increased already. So this increases the price of feeds. You now also sit down and say that these green schemes that we have here in Namibia, the itundas and the whatnot, also need to they do plant grass, but it's at a smaller at a smaller section. They need to plant grass and do cattle feed and start producing local cattle feeds at a large scale. Because right now, why the price of lucerne and grass bales, whether it's buffalo grass or elephant king grass, whichever type of grass we're currently using to feed our livestock, is being produced in South Africa. We rely everything to come from South Africa. So if there is a fuel hike in South Africa and they increase their prices, of course the prices have to increase locally this side. The same thing with if there's a nationwide strike on truckers. Truckers are striking in South Africa. We struggle to get those feeds. So we still have a reliance on South African farmers to produce feeds for our animals, such as the grass, with the hay and the grass would feed our livestock. That in future needs to change. As I said, the modern day farmer has to be able to adapt to conditions, but also be able to change his method of farming. Maybe also look into producing his own feeds in licks, or when you have a little field up in the north where you plant your maize, you can harvest those maize stalks and mill them if you can get the milling machine, and turn that into feeds, so you can be able to create feed for your livestock, so you don't really struggle if you're faced with something like this. But also, the modern day farmer needs to be able to look at the weather conditions. With climate change, global warming that's happening, the weather patterns are changing. We are in winter right now. It's July, but the conditions, one day it's extremely cold, the other day it's extremely warm. So you don't know. Like I'm wearing a sleeveless shirt right now, a vest, because it's not that warm. But I'm reading that from tomorrow onwards till Wednesday, it's going to be extremely cold. We're going to be having 1 degrees to 5 degrees temperatures here in Namibia, degrees Celsius, of course. So those are things that we're looking at. The government also, and this is something that I've also always come on board, and I always said that the government should step in the communal areas and not just leave a free for all. The problem that's happening in the communal areas, why they're the hardest hit right now with drought, is situations such as this guy is in the communal areas, the reserved areas, as we would call it, the Bantustans that was created by the apartheid government and the oppressive, the imperialistic government of the Germans and the apartheid government of South Africa, which still exists today. What this has done, it has left a situation whereby the government doesn't regulate those communal areas. You have farmers who are on a small piece of land, which they have to share with 10 or 20 or 50 or 60 or maybe close to 100 different families. And you have one guy who's running a very big herd of cattle. The one gentleman I heard of is running 100 heads of cattle, one individual gentleman. So what this guy does is that his cattle graze an area, a very large area, and where his cattle graze, other cattle cannot graze. So meaning he can graze a smaller piece of land faster than others can. So he puts pressure on his neighboring farmers, because now these guys cannot graze their cattle in the same place because his herd is so big. So the government needs to step in there and say, look, we as the Namibian government, through the Ministry of Agriculture, and maybe create an agency, say, look, we are drawing up a strategic plan in every communal area in Namibia of how many animals can be kept in a particular area, as sometimes the numbers of cattle are just too much. Some areas can carry a certain number of cattle, but because this individual runs a big herd of cattle, he overgrazes this area, or his animals completely graze an area in 3, 4, or 5 or 6 months. So if the rainfall is not that good, the people need to reduce their herds of cattle. But there are some people that are reluctant to do that. And what they do, and when you approach them and tell them, look, reduce your herd of cattle, they tell you, look, why don't you also buy some more? So the government needs to step up, because what this would do is the same thing that happened with some of the farmers in the area of Omashete area, where they took their animals and illegally invaded a military base because there's nothing to graze. The areas have been completely grazed out, empty. The only things that are left are thorn bushes. And most of these farmers, maybe if you can say they can sell 1 or 2 or sell a couple of cattle to buy the machine to start milling and creating their own alternative feeds, they can do that, but this costs money. You go to a bank to apply for a loan, it takes time. By the time that loan comes, maybe the grazing conditions have improved, or maybe you've lost already half of your animals. But then again, the government, through the Ministry of Agriculture, needs to say, look, we are willing to donate 10 or 7 millers in a communal area for people to create their own bush alternative feeds, which they should. But then they're not doing that. They also need to draw up a stock cap for each and every region, each and every communal area where various families have their homesteads there. They need to draw that number to say that within this area, every farmer is allowed to have maybe 100 cattle, not more. If you exceed the number, reduce. I've been calling for this. I've been advocating for it for a minute, saying they need to create a stock cap that says every farmer is allowed to have maybe 100 or 150. If you have more than 150 animals and the inspectors come and inspect and see that no, but Mitchell has more than 150 animals, he should sell some of his animals. He should sell some of his animals to limit the risk of overgrazing an area and destroying an area, because some of our communal areas, if you do travel to most of them, they have been turned into deserts. There's really nothing left there. So I believe that is where the government needs to step up and say, look, as much as we're asking people to do a 2% contribution and we're buying grass bales, or we're buying hay, which we're delivering to farmers who are in the communal areas, farmers who can't really afford it, the less fortunate farmers. As much as we're doing this, we still need to look at a long-term solution. And the long-term solution would be for the Ministry of Agriculture to come in and say, look, each and every farmer cannot run 500 or 600 heads of cattle in this area. We need to reduce the number of cattle so these areas can still remain productive. Not just for you guys, not just for you, but also not just for you who's currently here, but also for your kids and the generation after them that want to farm in this area, that this area still remains agricultural viable. That's one thing they can do. That's one thing they can look at. So these are the problems that we face. You have some farmers who, some situations are just unwilling to sell. You have some farmers who are pushed by, of course, human greed and want to have a very large herd of livestock in an area where they can't fence off or control the grazing in that area, or the water supply. So that's what we're faced. This drought is an extremely bad drought. Animals are dying. Price of feeds is going up, of course. Price of fuel is going up. And also, maybe lastly, people need to look at buying animals that are more drought hardy livestock that can navigate these conditions better than any other breed of livestock. There's another alternative thing one can look at. Reducing the head of cattle is one. Buying much more hardier animals, buying the cattle that can navigate this drought situation better. And also looking at communities coming together, one community village coming together and saying we are fencing off about 6 or 7 camps here in our area to save them as camps for when there is drought, or community members within a village area coming together and saying, look, let's buy a tractor, let's plant some grass, our own grass and our own feeds, and in case a drought like this is faced, we all contribute X amount of money, and we all do this, and we unite as a farm organization, and we do this. This can really assist in how the packaging of it can assist the community, because sometimes some good ideas need to come from the community and not from the central government or the Central Ministry of Agriculture. It needs to come from the bottom down, from the bottom up. So if the communal area farmers can sit down and say, look, we as the communal land farmers in this particular area are going to come together, buy a tractor, put money together, buy about 3 or 4 tractors, buy seeds, put up water facilities, and start irrigating a piece of land where we're going to plant our own grass, our own hay, and we're going to cut it and bale it and make it into bales and sell it. Keep some for ourselves and sell also to the nearby community. They can make money, but as you know, with everything in our great continent, there is a lot of push and pull. One person is willing to put in 100%, the other person is just willing to put 10%, and that is a problem. So we are facing a devastating drought, one of the worst we have seen in this country. We've had some rains in some parts of this country during the rainy season, but the bulk of this country, there's nothing. It's just dust and sand, and the cattle have nothing to eat. As I said, if you are one of the fortunate guys who can afford to buy yourself a milling machine, you can make your own alternative feeds. Where we just attended a lesson on how to make alternative feeds using the bushes that are encroaching our farms. These are the acacia bushes, the thorn bushes, of course. A nickname for them, they call them vachabiki, thorn bushes. So those are the thorn bushes that some people are currently now using in order to produce feeds for their livestock. In others, we have to pay the bill and go to our agricultural outlets and buy the bales of grass that are available, even though they're becoming a bit expensive. What can you do? It's all about survival. Um, I even saw a rare case scenario where some farmers were selling boxes to their cattle, and I mean, not selling, but giving boxes, feeding their cattle with boxes. So we're in a situation whereby it's try to survive by any means and hope for rain to come around um, within the next rainy season. Because if it really stays like this, a lot of farming families are going to have to, we're going to have to sell livestock and pull out of farming completely. But we pray and hope that things will get better as the season goes on. But I say this also needs to be a lesson for most farmers to learn to reduce the heads of cattle. Number one, learn to try and be innovative in their farming methods, such as producing, if even if you're planting mealies and you don't eat the mealies, just plant them, water them, irrigate them, let them grow, harvest the cob, harvest the maize stalk, and turn it into feeds for your livestock. You know, so now we need to look at alternative ways. You know, there's a new company, Agri Tech, that came into the business that I see is starting to plant barley, is finding other ways of creating feeds for people, much more faster ways. So that is what's happening in Namibia, and thanks again for watching Farmers Corner. Thank you.